Hello, everyone. James Newbury here from Phyba. I'm lucky enough to be sitting down with Chanel Stuck and Xavi. Xavi also works with me at Phyba, and Chanel's been a long-term fan of the brand. And today we're going to be sitting down and having a chat with you about some of the Phyba products. We're going to be talking about some common issues Chanel helps women with, specifically day-to-day with their nutrition, their training, dealing with pre-menopause, menopause, and we're going to be answering some questions along the way. But just a quick, brief background about myself. I grew up playing sport. I've always been a huge fan of nutrition and figuring out how to better my athletic career through nutrition. Along the way, I've worked with nutritionists and dietitians and sports psychologists and naturopaths along the way, and I really took a liking to the naturopathic approach to supplementation, looking at ways that we can enhance the way that the body works using natural herbs and traditional Chinese medicine. And that's where it kind of brought me to Phyba, which is essentially a mix between traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic practices, and linking them between, I guess, the modern Western science element to fermentation and other bits and pieces, just to help people get the most out of their body, improve immune system function, help them increase energy and just, I guess, daily vitality. And for me, it's always been about creating a really wholesome gut microbiome. So what we know thus far is that the gut plays an integral role in so many different processes inside the body. Not only does it help increase and boost immune system, but it also helps us be better athletes, be better emotionally. And for us, creating our product suite within Phyba, everything has a gut specific bias towards it. So whether it's a protein or a pre-workout or a multivitamin mineral top up, it has some type of specific gut microbiome aid, whether it's increasing variety or increasing the variety of prebiotics that get ingested, but it also goes along the lines of postbiotic material too, which is a super fascinating space. So for me, I'm just here to help answer some questions. And I'm going to kind of lead the way, I guess, but I'll hand it over to Xavi. If you could give us a quick little brief introduction on what you do, Xavi, and then we'll pass it over to Chanel, the main star of the show.
For sure. So I come into this super stoked, for the ASN collaboration and offering this group of women some really powerful insights into health. Chanel is the expert on this. I have tons of experience with it, but I defer to Chanel on so many of these topics because she has such a great practice going. But I've worked with a lot of women around the world in my functional medicine practice, specifically with thyroid conditions, metabolic issues, and focusing on a lot of the holistic interventions that can improve some pretty remarkable standards of health, whether it be blood sugar regulation, hormonal production. Hormones are a huge topic in the women's space. Obviously, having healthy cycles and feeling like your full body is on board with the demands of being alive nowadays, which are more than ever, and mitigating, this is to James's point, some of the maladaptive effects of stress through different adaptogens, traditional Chinese herbs, and also some lifestyle interventions that are pretty basic, looking at sleep, hydration, nutrient varieties, so forth and so on. So I bring a lot of that experience to the conversation. And I've had just the pleasure of working with fantastic women throughout the world, in the States, here in Australia, on dialing in these daily habits that can make a huge difference. So I'm really excited, really stoked. And to that point, I think the star of the show deserves an intro of her own. Chanel, please bring all the wisdom that you have. I know that ladies will love it.
I'm really not the star of the show, but I'm very excited to be here. I'm super passionate about helping women just be their best selves and live the best version of themselves, because I know at 51, I have pretty much feel better now than I did when I was 21. I have more muscle on me. I am fitter, stronger, faster, and I know much more about how to look after my body. So I'm super passionate about teaching other women that as well. I think especially once we hit 40, because a little bit of background, I suppose, as to why I'm sitting here today. I still am a CrossFit athlete, but I was very competitive, trying to qualify for the CrossFit Games, and I was about 44 when the perimenopause hit me out of nowhere. I didn't know anything about it, and I kind of just stumbled along. No one kind of mentioned menopause along the way. I didn't know what was going on, and it was my journey of kind of 4 or 5 years of learning and becoming a nutritionist along the way, understanding that I had to master my nutrition and lifestyle to get myself back on track. And so I want to, and am passionate about saving other women from having to go through that hardship, if you like. I mean, I've obviously learned a lot of lessons along the way, and I think that's why I am such a good nutritionist, sports nutritionist, because I have been there and suffered along the way. So I totally understand when people come to me where they're at. But yeah, like just that you can turn this around. And both James and Xavi touched on like creating good behaviors and habits. And there's so many things that we can use to support ourselves along the way. And of course, Phyba has been a big part of that for me.
That's amazing. Chanel, thank you so much. From my experience working with you, you're very much a protein forward or a pro-protein nutritionist. So you'll always recommend trying to increase protein, especially as we age, just to try and, I guess, mitigate any potential sarcopenia or muscle loss along the way. What are some things that you've run into in the past, especially working with women? Is there a majority of women that come to you that are drastically under eating protein, and why do you put such an emphasis on eating more protein?
Yeah, but like all of those things really. And honestly, obviously I work mainly with women, but generally most people I speak to, because when you're a nutritionist or, a dietitian or in this space, people tend to tell you what they eat. It's like, I don't ask them. They're telling me like, oh, I had this for breakfast. I'm like, oh, that's great. Generally, like, everyone is missing protein, like across the board. And I think there's a number of reasons for it. One, the recommended dietary allowance for protein is set at the minimum. So rather than it being set at like a top threshold, it's set to survive. And so I always think when I'm working with someone, and I know myself, I don't want to just be surviving. I want to be thriving. So that RDA is really, it was set in the war, so we haven't really caught up to date with that, or we're not using it in the way that it's a minimum, like it's a minimum requirement. So often I see women that aren't even hitting that because they don't actually understand. So I run like free protein challenges a few times a year for that reason, because this is probably the biggest thing I see. And it probably the biggest challenge, like once you understand how to eat protein and go about it, it becomes like just like any other behavior. But when you're coming in from under eating protein and not understanding how to do it, it is a big challenge. You feel very full, you feel satiated, often like your gut microbiome takes some time to adjust. You might get some side effects from it. Is this normal? Like, I'm also often like dealing with women who are 40 plus, so they're kind of that Gen X generation who have grown up with the supermodels that were like waist thin. And so their whole mentality and conditioning has been to undereat. So because we thought, and we were kind of conditioned, that for us to change our body, we just eat less and exercise more. So there's some conditioning that has to change around that. That also is education that has to come into it, where protein needs to lead your, I like to call it building your plate. Like, so if I am looking at a meal, I'm building my plate with protein first, because as a 51-year-old, I eat 150 grams of protein a day. When I'm 61, 71, 81, 91, 101, I'm going to live till I'm 100. I will still be eating 150 grams of protein a day. I will be needing that. But I might not necessarily be doing the same level of CrossFit or high rocks that I'm doing now at 51 when I'm 101. So my carbohydrate will not be the same, because carbohydrates are only for activity. So I think when I'm really working with people, or even when I'm talking to bigger groups. I'm kind of going back to like a nutrition 101, if you like, because as a society, we don't get taught really what our food is doing for us, if that makes sense. But that's why I lead with protein. It really has so many benefits to obviously muscle, building muscle, recovery, cell rebuilding. There's just like so many benefits. Yeah.
I love that. And Xavi, you've probably run into this before as well. What types of levels of protein have you seen people consuming on a regular basis and wondering why they're feeling, maybe a bit off or they're not gaining muscle? And what types of guidelines, and I'll repeat guidelines, would we recommend for people, looking to hit, I say again, minimum requirements of protein? And I think that RDA point that you mentioned, Chanel, is quite important. Is that RDA, people are seeing that as like, okay, if I hit that, yeah, I'm good. And if I miss it, it's not so bad. But that is, again, the minimum requirement. It's like we should have set it at, double the amount. And then if you don't hit it, then at least you're still within a healthy range. Xavi, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed in women that I've coached a lot is the concept of caloric deprivation or caloric deficit in favor of fat loss. And the concept that conjuncts that, which is there's a link between increased intake of, let's just say, saturated fat and the risk of heart disease. So the first trigger I'm going to pull is reducing protein. And you have a scenario where there's low protein intake, caloric deficit that's not commensurate with kind of a whole food plant-based approach to nutrition, or if you include animal foods, high quality, grass-fed, locally sourced animal proteins. And what ends up happening is what Chanel just mentioned, the most important macronutrient when it comes to protein synthesis and lean muscle mass is now reduced. And you're still in a nutritively depleted state, right? So the quantity of amino acids on board is reduced. Your ability to recover from workouts is reduced. You're not fueling the system to properly participate in something like CrossFit, which, let's say I want to lose weight, so I'm going to start increasing physical activity and the intensity of demand in physical activity. And the quandary of, I'm not losing weight, I don't feel good, I don't sleep good, I don't understand why I've done all the right things, quote unquote, and yet I'm not getting the result that I want. And then at a more high level, complex 360-degree view of human health in that regard, you also have irregularities with hormonal production, maybe lack of sex drive or irregular periods or cycles. And you think, this can't be it because I'm doing everything right, but I don't feel good. And clearly my system is not responding commensurately. So I've always been a really big fan of protein, and Chanel, maybe you can relate. It can be really, really hard to get somebody to eat an adequate amount of protein every day in order to hit the targets, to recover well, to sleep well, to have good, stable moods and blood sugar. That's a huge one as well, as the stabilization of blood sugar. So in terms of recommendation, I'm new to Australia, so I'm going to do grams per pound, right, versus kilos. But depending on physical activity, I've always kind of been in the range of 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. The more physically active you are, the more you can tolerate that. I wouldn't say there's like an upper threshold per se of protein intake. You can go pretty hard with it. However, of course, be mindful of total caloric intake, expenditure, so forth and so on. But for women in particular, it's incredibly important. And one other thing I'll throw into the conversation, one of my first fitness jobs, I worked at a country club. And the median age of the women that came to class, all women, was about 76. And we would have these long, drawn out conversations about diet and how important it was. And I worked with a few of them nutritionally, and the lack of food intake was shocking. They said, well, I just don't eat because I want to stay skinny and lean. And yet phenotypically, they didn't look skinny and lean. So I thought, what is going on here? There's some cycles of binge eating, so forth and so on. And I would emphasize protein as the first intervention. I said, don't be afraid of this. Not only are your energy levels going to be better, but your cravings for simple refined carbohydrates are going to reduce tremendously. And you're not going to binge eat. So at 11 p.m., midnight, you're not going to go to the fridge and grab these cookies or cakes or simple carbs because you're starving. You'll have stability throughout the day. And when you come to class, you'll feel so much better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've always been one in terms like being, I guess, Australian and working with grams per kilo of lean body mass. A recommendation that I've always kind of stuck to has been, if you're on the very lower limit of, say, physical activity on a daily basis, you could probably scrape around the 1.2 grams per kilo of lean mass, but 1.4 upwards is kind of where you kind of want to benchmark and start. And then for someone, I guess, like Chanel or like myself or like yourself, Xavi, is we're kind of probably all hovering around that 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of lean mass. And I say lean mass because let's just say I'm currently a fairly lean 88 kilo human. But if I was, say, 120 kilos, but my ideal body weight is around about here, I will base my protein intake off my ideal lean mass body weight, which is around about the 88, 90 kilo mark. So then I'll base that on that, knowing that I should be around about the 2.0, like the 2 grams per kilo of lean mass, sitting at 88 kilos. I'm then obviously looking at around about 175 to 180 grams of protein per day. And that's a really easy way for you to kind of figure out where your guidelines should sit and getting close to those ranges on a daily basis. Now, just for the people that are watching this, what are some great ways that they can break up their protein intake throughout the day? And what's a good way to track it so they know if they're tracking correctly? Chanel, could you speak to a little bit about that? How do you get your clients to manage their protein intake so they know where they're at?
Sure. So obviously, like, doing that calculation is essential. Everyone's going to be different. Once we know how much it is, then research shows the first meal of the day, and no matter whether you're intermittent fasting or not, as long as it's the first meal, like, so breakfast is still breaking a fast. It doesn't matter whether that's at 7 a.m. or 11 a.m. Should be like, it should be a minimum of 30 grams. If we can make it more, that just helps. So I'll just use myself as a guide. I eat 150 grams of protein a day. And this is an example I hear a lot. I had protein for breakfast. I had 2 eggs on toast with avocado. And I'm like, okay, so 2 eggs, an egg is 7 grams of protein. That's 14 grams of protein. I'm trying to hit 150 grams for the day. How's the rest of my day looking? Like, when I've got still 130 grams plus to go. So when we're hitting our first meal of the day with, like, I like to hit 40 to 50 grams because that's a big chunk out of the way and it keeps me full and satiated. If you're listening into this and you haven't been doing this and this is going to be a change, I'll just tell you, you will feel full and it will keep you satisfied for 4 or 5 hours, like, because of muscle protein synthesis kicks into place. So this is what we want. So if we can really prioritize a good chunk of protein with the first meal, research shows the first and last meal really being, like, most of the time across the board, we hit our dinner, like, that's the one meal we are good at, like meat and 3 veg kind of thing. So we do tend to get, like, a good amount of protein at dinner. But if I personally, and like my clients do, is just breaking it up over the day allows you to be able to hit those numbers. So for me, I try for at least 40 grams for breakfast, sometimes more. Same for lunch, 30 to 40 grams. When we're hitting 30 grams, I'll just add, when we're hitting 30 grams, we do trigger that process of muscle protein synthesis. And that's what a lot of women who are quite active, like they're at CrossFit or they're at the gym and they're trying to build muscle, and then they're coming home and they're missing the 30 grams. So when we're missing that 30 grams, we're actually not giving our body enough fuel to build that good quality muscle. And so you're not closing the loop on the good training that you've done. So I just wanted to mention that because it's really important. So if you can, much better.
Absolutely. And Xavi, how would you typically recommend people track?
And from
I think you popped in and out there, Chanel.
So
were you going to say something real quick?
does that mean? So from a tracking point of view, so we have like a couple of different ways we can do it, depending on your person. Like, so some people like to do the pen and paper, like old fashioned, like you need to know, obviously, the breakdown of your recipes. So my clients like already have that done for them in their recipes. So they're kind of lucky. But otherwise, like these days, there's lots of great tracking apps that you can get. I have used MyFitnessPal for years because I put all my recipes in there, but there's lots of ones that you can use, and that makes it very easy because you can just look up what you're eating and it will give you the numbers you need. So it really comes down to the individual and what they like. But these days with the phone and the apps, that's very, very easy.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Definitely.
And Xavi, would you recommend?
I'll throw in one other thing about that. There are some tracking apps now that will give you a breakdown of the amino acid content of your daily intake, which is also really important. So we look at the total protein intake as vital to lean muscle mass and all these processes that we're looking at. But there are some apps that will break down asparagine, leucine, these different amino acids to see if there's any specific one in which you might be deficient. Obviously, we talk a lot at Phyba about leucine as being really important for muscle protein synthesis. And just by tracking on a daily basis, you don't have to put anything special into an app, but it will give you a breakdown of that amino acid content, which is really cool.
Yeah. And I think for myself, I would find it extremely difficult to hit my daily protein intake of, 170 to 200 grams of protein, depending on the day. Like if I'm working out really hard and getting ready for the games, I'm actually eating more than that. Like I'm up over 200 grams of protein per day. When I'm not training for the CrossFit Games, like my kind of stability point is about that 180 mark. But whilst I've got, multiple hours of training under my belt, lots of muscle breakdown happening, just need to top up a little bit more. I find it very hard to hit those numbers without having a good quality protein. And so that's where kind of we started, or the inception of Phyba kind of began, was figuring out a way that we could create the best plant-based protein in the world that consisted of a very good amino acid profile, meaning that protein is the combination of amino acids, and that amino acid pool that we intake, we want to have the right ratios of amino acids. And like Xavi just said, leucine being the number one driver for maintaining muscle mass and stimulating muscle growth. So we made sure when we developed our Phyba plant protein here that we included high levels of leucine by combining 4 types of protein. Number 1 being organic pea protein. Number 2, watermelon seed, pumpkin seed, and sunflower seed protein. By bringing all these plant proteins together, you then start to develop a really wide spectrum of amino acids, which really help to not only build muscle and maintain muscle, but helps with the gut microbiome. It helps with hormone production. It helps with just about every process within the body. So that was one thing we wanted to combat. Number 2 was digestion and making sure that the protein was as bioavailable as possible. So we did 2 things to combat this. Number 1 is a fine milling process. So making sure that the protein molecules are they're milled ultra fine. So when we put the protein back into liquid or put it into a smoothie or into your shaker cup, that they rehydrate really well. This not only gives you a smoother mouth feel, so it's not that grainy, gritty texture, it's ultra smooth, but also allows it to be wet by the time it hits the stomach. And when it's really wet and damp when it hits the stomach, it allows it to digest much easier than, say, a dry protein powder or something that hasn't been penetrated properly by the water molecule or the liquid molecules needing to get into the protein. The third part, or the second part to that, is adding in the gut matrix. Now, gut matrix is a complex of prebiotics, which essentially are the fuel for your probiotics. And everyone's probably heard of probiotics before. They are the beneficial bacteria found within the gut. You'll also find them in kefir and yogurts and kimchi and sauerkraut and miso and tempeh and all that type of stuff. Prebiotics feed the probiotics, and then the probiotics produce things called postbiotics. Gut matrix is a combination of all 3. Typically, you'll find with most plant proteins, they'll give you a digestive enzyme to help break down the protein. This one actually comes with the prebiotic fuel mixed with the probiotics that help produce the enzymes and the short-chain fatty acids. So you're actually getting plant-specific nutrients to help break down the protein to make it more bioavailable, but also helps your gut microbiome stay nice and diverse and fueled well. So that's an added bonus that is a little bit unique to fiber. And then the last thing that we're kind of looking at here is the taste profile. So like I mentioned, not only having the gut matrix as a gut bias or gut health promoting effect, we also use natural aroma oils. So they're not getting anything artificial or synthetic that's going to upset the gut lining. And a lot of people have probably heard of leaky gut before. And this is kind of when we get permeation between the gut in a way that is over and above the amount that we want. We want a little bit, but we don't want too much. The gut lining is only one cell thick. And if we start to degrade that cell lining, we start to pop up with random symptoms of inflammation. It could be an autoimmune spike in something, or it might be psoriasis, or it could be something else, or it could be some type of skin condition. So we want to try and make sure that we're maintaining gut lining integrity. And by using the natural aroma oil extracts, we're not aggravating or degrading the gut lining. And that's really important. I think a lot of proteins out there on the market are quite harsh on the gut. Especially the low quality whey proteins. Some are great, some are good if you're using a high quality whey protein, power to you, but also with the plant protein too, some can be quite harsh. So looking at it from the perspective of quality plant protein and also those added bonuses, I think we've really developed the number one plant-based protein on the planet. And I'm biased because we created together, Xavi, so I'm very biased there. But more to my point, is that I found that by adding in at least 2 of these a day, that's covering about 50 grams of protein for me. So essentially I'm kicking off the day by knowing that I've got 50 grams already banked with my 2 scoops of fiber. And then I've only got to kind of attain another, if I'm eating 200 grams of protein a day, another 150 from, my food. So that's a really easy way to get to your protein targets by making sure you can supplement with something of high quality. Do you recommend high quality supplements as well in your protein challenges, Chanel?
100%. Oh no, have we got some? I just moved out here to get a better Wi-Fi connection. We're not getting feedback.
No, you're good.
You're good. Okay. Okay, yes, 100%. And I'm a big fan, obviously, of fiber as well, and using protein powders as a way of being able to hit your protein requirements. Like we were talking about just before earlier, and I gave that example of the 2 eggs on toast. Often people don't understand where their protein is coming from. So once they kind of get the gist of how to make it happen, they still come up short. So adding a protein shake is a super easy way to get an easy chunk of protein into your day. And especially when you're I obviously use it every day myself, but when you're traveling or you don't have the ability to be making your food you regularly would. I just was in Vietnam for a couple of weeks, but I was having my protein powder every day because there was lack of protein being available to me. So I'm a big fan of protein powders. And of course, I love fiber because of the gut matrix and the fine meal, like you were mentioning. It's the best tasting plant-based protein. I've honestly tried so many, and this is, but if you haven't actually tried fiber, you're missing out as far as I'm concerned. But the quality does matter, you can, like James was saying, you can get away with it for a while, and then your body will catch up and it will give you a notification when things are no good, and it's really not worth going through that. So getting a good quality, like when we look at food, we want good quality nutrition across the board, so that includes your supplementation.
Absolutely. And something that I do want to touch on here, and I will probably add this in as well, we also highly recommend a particular amino acid, especially with fiber, and I'm sure, Chanel, you recommend this too, but a daily basis dose of creatine. I think a dose of creatine on a daily basis is going to not only improve the way you think, but improve the way you perform and improve the way you age. Yes. There have been some wild studies of late talking about concussion and Alzheimer's and the positive effects of creatine. So we have a creatine monohydrate as well that is ultra smooth. It's very fine. But just a daily dose of creatine. I think the biggest misconceptions here with creatine is that it might make you moody. It might make you angry. That's not the case. They're things called steroids, which we don't do. So
Yes.
this is essentially an amino acid found within animal products, but this is a plant-based fermented creatine monohydrate. So everything that we do is vegan, but I really do believe in terms of keeping muscle mass on and aiding to the negative effect of sarcopenia or losing muscle mass, this will really help buffer that as much as possible. So, Xavi, can you talk to a little bit about creatine and why it's important for people to be consuming on a regular basis?
100%. It's really well tolerated and very safe. You can take high quantities of creatine without many maladaptive effects, if any at all. But it's a really, really well-researched and incredibly effective tool at improving the synthesis of protein, the actual action potential of muscles during workouts. So the creatine phosphate pathway is correlated with powerful movements, explosive movements. So if you're an Olympic lifter, you do CrossFit, you're doing high rocks and you're on your wall balls and you're just getting absolutely gassed, which we all are, regardless of fitness level, right? Although Wall Ball Mastery is live, so if you want to go check that out, James just dropped that. So creatine is incredibly helpful for powering muscles and ensuring that they have the capacity to produce very intense, fast muscle contractions. It's also great for cognition. So there's a correlate in between creatine supplementation and our ability to maintain focus, our ability to maintain energy levels throughout the day, correlate with professional duties, which we all have to do regardless of how fit you are, right? All in all, it's super well researched for those key components and incredibly safe. It's cheap too. I know there are a million different tips and tricks out there in terms of improving muscle mass and protocols, supplement packs, whatsoever. We really believe that creatine is one of the most easy, effective supplements you can incorporate into your routine and see a massive difference. I can actually feel it right away when I take creatine during periods where I don't versus when I am. It kicks on immediately after taking it. I started taking creatine when I was 12, 13. I lived across from the World Gym. It was just there in the space, and it's been in the space for a long time, but very few supplements or compounds have been a part of the fitness space for so long and continue year after year after year, decade after decade to get the vote of approval from the best in the business and those who are getting results from it. So creatine is great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I kind of sit within the realm of 5 to 8 grams a day. That's kind of where I like to situate myself. I know some people like a smaller dose. Sometimes it upsets stomach, but I have to say I've never had anyone come back to us with upset stomach with our creatine just because it is so fine. It's not granular. It's very powdery. It's almost like flour. But everyone will have a different sort of idea on where their levels kind of sit. I think a lot of females like the 3 gram amount, but I know a lot of people are up around that 5 to 7 grams a day as a daily kind of staple, and that's definitely a staple for me as well. What I would like to touch on, and this is Chanel and Xavi, as you know, my favorite of all products is Super Browns. Now, I think a lot of people who are watching this are part of the ASN community. You've probably all heard of greens powders. Now, greens powders are, they've been around for quite a long time, but essentially what they're there for is to top you up on the greens you may be missing in a daily diet. They're there to help top you up on the micronutrients that you may be missing out on. Now, Super Browns is a bit of a spin on that because instead of just searching for the nutrients found within green food or high quality green vegetables, in particular, things like wheatgrass and watercress and kale and spinach and barley grass and everything in between, spirulina, chlorella, we've created a Browns powder that is a combination of not only greens, but blues and reds and yellows and every other hue you could possibly think of that have some type of antioxidant or micronutrient effect on the body. So instead of, keeping us within the realm of greens, we've gone out and around that, and we've kind of combined the rainbow into a Super Browns product that looks like this. But not only does it cover the greens standpoint, but it also has an adaptogen complex in there too, which is a mixture of probably some herbs you've heard of in the past, things like ashwagandha, astragalus, ginseng, maca root, dangshen, atractylides. It also has some pine bark and oak bark in there. But essentially what this is here for is a micronutrient top up above and beyond what you'd typically get in a solo greens powder. And I'm going to bring this back to what you might be experiencing in a daily active lifestyle is when we put ourselves in a position of stress, and we need stress to adapt. Don't get me wrong. We are not here to completely mitigate all stress, because when we mitigate all stress, we don't grow, we don't stay strong. This is why we weight train until the day we die, is because we need that stress adaptation to happen so we stay strong. Now, if we were to sit inside a bubble and not do anything, not lift any weights and not come into contact with any germs, we're then going to find ourselves in a position of weakness. So when we are putting ourselves out there and we're putting ourselves under stress, whether it's physical stress, whether it's work stress, emotional stress, stress is stress. And the way that the body will deal with that stress is different for everyone. But ways that we can help mitigate how much it rises to the surface in terms of symptoms is by making sure that we have enough micronutrients on board. And again, opposed to macronutrients, which are our carbs, proteins, and fats, we want enough micronutrients on board to support keeping our cells healthy and regular, making sure our gut microbiome is in check, making sure we have the essential nutrients and micronutrients and trace minerals to act and thrive and survive really, really well on a day-to-day basis. And that's exactly what the Super Browns does. Xavi, could you please explain just a little bit about what Super Browns is in a little bit more detail than that? And then Chanel, would you also be able to explain why Super Browns is so good, especially for ladies going through perimenopause or menopause?
Sure.
Yeah, easy enough. I explained it last week in this way, that your body is tuned and toned to have a certain demand for micronutrient intake that is correlate to more energy pathways than I could ever possibly describe in one conversation. That's intimate with cellular energy. It's intimate with our hormonal production, our endocrine system, and the hormones that they produce. There are so many different pathways that these key factors that we commonly don't know about in our diet are intimate with intake, that then correlates to the trigger, if you will, of these variety of biochemical reactions. And what we see frequently in the supplement space is the overutilization of synthetic isolates of vitamins that are not whole food, right? So they do not come in a whole food complex. And when you look at an isolate versus a whole food complex, we know something that we commonly consume, like a blueberry, is a whole food complex that has a variety of micronutrients in there that are positively correlate to our overall health. And when they act together synergistically as a complex, there's greater bioavailability in the body, and those micronutrients can go to their specific pathways and trigger the positive health effects. So what we design Super Browns to do is to be a whole food complex of micronutrients that not only integrate these traditional Chinese herbs. We have atractyloides, astragalus, fantastic for immunity, ashwagandha, fantastic for stress resilience, but also these fruits like cranberry and noni that are fantastic for skin health, energy. They're tasty. We really brought in this full spectrum of whole foods into this blend, some fulvic mineral pitch for our overall, electrolyte balance, to make it something that's delicious, but specifically designed to support your energy levels, your skin health, your immunity, all these factors that we typically outsource to a variety of supplements, all made into one, so that you can have a delicious drink every day and not have to worry about it so much, or frankly, waste your money on things that are not going to be as bioavailable and health productive as the supplement industry may offer or promise you. So Chanel, with that, I want to ask a couple questions in and around micronutrient intake. And for women specifically, why is it so important that from a dietary perspective, and from perhaps a Super Browns perspective, if you want to speak on that, that we have a variety, a really robust variety of micronutrients that we're bringing into the body. What's the implication of that for women's health?
Well, it's very great, actually. And as we age, things are not working as well as they used to when we were younger. And once we hit 40, I always kind of use 40 as a benchmark, because you like the 40 plus, that decade, at some point your hormones will change. So if you're a female, it's not like if, it's when you will come to perimenopause at some point, and that decade is when your hormones will start changing. Now, the impact of that is that it will affect your gut. It will affect like all aspects of your physical body. And so your gut microbiome gets affected by the drop in estrogen. That obviously affects everything in your body. You could have the most perfect diet. If your gut microbiome is off, it makes no difference, right? Like, you are not going to be a healthy human being. So we need to be having things like I mentioned, if you had a perfect nutrition, perfect diet, but your gut microbiome is not helping you out, then we need things like this so we can actually make sure we're closing the loop on our nutrition. And like, generally, you're looking at kind of super browns as, I'm not a fan of greens powders, for example, but I love super browns, right? And the reason I'm not a fan of greens powders is because I eat my vegetables. But the things that are in super browns, I will not get in like my normal nutrition, like on a daily basis. And so super browns is like one of my non-negotiables, just like creatine before. That's a non-negotiable for me as well, because it has a number of adaptogens that are very beneficial for female hormone health as well. So there's a number of reasons, like big conversation, big topic, as we age, and even estrogen will affect our digestive enzymes, So all of these things are factors into why getting nutrient-dense food is so important, and having something that's easily consumable like super browns just takes the guesswork out of it. I mean, you still need to, when we're talking about supplementation, like, nutrition is the base of your health, and then supplementation takes you to the next level. So it just means you're not guessing from your food. If you've hit the mark, you're making sure it kind of like you're topped up there.
You've hit the nail absolutely on the head there, I think, Chanel. And again, these supplements are gap fillers for an already good diet, and you are going to be finding that some of the foods and some of the functional foods found within the likes of Super Browns and Yeet Perfect and Florafuel, you may not have heard them before, but they are in their whole form, blended up into a beautiful, easy to drink, convenient powder that doesn't contain synthetics or artificials. It's a great, again, gap filler for an already good diet that is just covering your bases. It's a base coverer, and it may just make you feel a little bit more vital on a day-to-day basis. And again, it doesn't taste like that grassy greens powder you typically get, which is one thing we really wanted to combat. Was people want to be enjoying the food that they eat and the supplements they take. They have to taste good too. And we can make them taste good these days. We have such great food techs in the space now. We can make them taste good. So we might as well make them taste good and as healthy as they possibly can. I've always been a big fan of Super Browns, and I'm really excited to expand on what we do, especially within that adaptogen space and what we can provide in terms of the micronutrients. We have a few things coming with Phyba that I think is going to blow people's minds. And Chanel, I know you're going to absolutely love them. You'll be the first to try them too. Xavi, have you got any other questions that you think might be advantageous? And again, we can always circle back to questions after this video is posted to the group. But have you got anything else that you'd like to cap things off with?
Absolutely. I think one of the things you just mentioned, Chanel, and something that I've worked with women before, is the influence of stress and the correlate to hormonal production. That could be the HPA axis, these variety of mechanisms in the body that are intimately influenced by stress. So when it comes to working with women in the space, you're looking at pretty much everything in life is a form of stress. We have dietary stress, stress from physical activity, hormonal stress, electromagnetic stress, all these different factors that summate in our overall expression of health. Is there anything that you found really helpful in working with women when it comes to addressing the roots of stress and how to adopt a more holistic approach to lifestyle management to support healthy hormones and a healthy body?
Stress is a big one. And like when we're looking at the perimenopause, menopausal journey, if you like, it's probably the biggest trigger for menopause symptoms. Like James, you talked about before, stress is a normal part of life and we need a certain amount of it in a normal dose. When we are dealing with high levels of stress day in, day out, it's not good. It's actually toxic for our system. And like you said, Xavi, it affects our hormones and sleep and all sorts of things. So this is something I've had to personally lean into, being the kind of type A overachiever, where I've had to learn to balance my life out, really looking at, I still am an athlete, so I still do a lot of, work output but I have to balance that with grounding myself and meditation. And I actually like to journal. So that's one of the things for me that helps bring me down. It also will impact your sleep. So this is kind of, for me, at night, I like to stretch as part of my going to bed routine, help bring me down. It's a twofold effect that helps my body, with CrossFit as well. Putting things into place where you are actually looking at it from a holistic point of view, where what is causing you stress in your lifestyle? If it's things like your job or your relationship, or you have to look outside of the box. This is going to look different for everyone, and this is where I think as a society, unfortunately, we don't do a great job of helping educate around stress and how to manage it. We find ourselves, we're probably in the most stressful era ever, as we've progressed through generations, but we're not given any real tools to show us how to manage this. So we need to learn and lean into it. It will affect your life in a great deal if you don't look at it and make some changes. Obviously, there's we can use supplements and things like this to help, but we need to look at changing some of the ways we either manage it or deal with it, or bringing things like meditation, grounding, the different aspects like that into your life to balance out. When I'm dealing with women, we're always talking about nutrition first, but I'm a health coach as well. So I'm a qualified health coach. So I'm always looking at the whole person, and that means nutrition, that means sleep, drinking water, getting your steps in, it's balance, it's all of the things. And it's not ever yes, we're talking about nutrition here and supplementation, but actually there's all these little things that it's like a jigsaw puzzle that you have to put them together to create you feeling your optimal self. And dealing with that side of your life is a really important one as well. So I teach a lot about that.
It's incredible. I love it. And all those different factors are hugely important. And one thing I remind people of when I work with them is this is also a gradual process. If you're starting from zero, you are not going to be holistic superwoman tomorrow. It's just too much energy and too much change. So whether it's the Phyba product suite or incorporating these holistic lifestyle interventions, pace yourself. Just like you build up to a high rocks race or Ironman or CrossFit, do one thing really well, replicably. I'm mincing my words today, with great replication over time to the point at which it becomes second nature. You don't need to focus on doing it manually. It's automatic. So pick one thing, do it consistently, let it become part of you, and then add on top of that over time, and you'll get a great overall journey, right? And great results from that.
Yeah, that's definitely agree.
Yeah, I think you guys have hit the nail on the head. And I think there are so many other topics for us to talk about in terms of energy production and some other bits and pieces that I'd love to tap into, but we might save that for another one. And we can also get questions from this one that we can then put into the next, which I think is going to be super valuable for anyone who watches. But I just wanted to say a huge thank you, Xavi. Huge thank you, Chanel, for jumping on. ASN, thank you guys so much for letting us become a part of the community. And if you guys have questions about anything to do with lifestyle, health, nutrition, training, please feel free to send a message through to the ASN guys that can get in contact with us, or feel free to find us online and touch base and ask the questions, because we're happy to help. That's what we're here for. We're essentially, we were born to serve. So let's get after it. And guys, thank you so much. We look forward to doing this next time. And yeah, all the best with your health journeys, guys. And till next time.